What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So as y'all know, in the recent video I did end up going over the reason or why unfinished games can be doomed, but in this video I wanted to touch on a different topic. Are games being rushed out more now than they were before? Now I would say a lot of players are probably going to jump in and go, yeah, blocked. They definitely are. And you know what? It seems a lot of games do seem to be rushed out a lot more than they were before. Unless I'm tripping out, maybe there's going to be more deadlines and stuff on things. I don't really know. I do understand that, the publishers are coming through. They probably have shareholders in there. Like, yo, get this out, bro. We need our money. We invested in this or stuff like that. Like, I understand that side of it. But at the same time, though, one of the ways I look at this is, well, if you look at a game coming out too early, then it's going to be in, the unfinished state, as I touched on in that other video. And then what's that going to do, though, if you're actually investing all the money into the said game to make it great or get a lot of stuff out on it, then if you actually release the game unfinished, you are most likely not going to get the return that you're actually looking for. Shocking, isn't it? Who actually would have thought if you release something unfinished or rush it out, you're probably not going to get what you wanted for it? Weird, what a concept. Who would have thought? But there's actually another side to this, though. Y'all remember back in the day when Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown had that statement or that video on it, to where they were basically saying the game is ahead of schedule. It's going to be releasing, quote unquote, in September. It's coming out sooner than they actually thought or whatever. The thing about that, though, is, was that actually another forefront for something going along the lines of, yo, we're actually putting the game out now because we don't have a choice, it's ahead of schedule, but it's actually not. We all do know apparently Battlefield 2042 had something like this, to where they were looking at it and the game wasn't finished or something along the lines of that, even though they're saying that it was ahead of schedule, but it wasn't, and all that kinds of crazy stuff there. So they do end up releasing the game, and it's not going to be what they would have thought. All kinds of things are missing. They actually needed a lot more time. In some cases, we have discussed this, but around a year, maybe a year and a half more in development time would have made the game a lot better than what we would have actually gotten. The thing about that, though, is they actually released the game on that ahead of schedule type of thing. Then they're actually going to see the game underperforming every single area that they actually thought it would have been great in. They're going to notice having refunds. The pre-orders aren't all that great. A lot of players aren't buying the game. The game has tons of issues. They then end up refunding the game, and they're like, yo, they have a surprise Pikachu face going, wait, why is the game underperforming? Oh, well, I can name a couple of things on why the game isn't doing good. A few of the reasons can be the servers not working, a lot of issues that they actually thought were going to be fixed in the beta but weren't fixed in the game itself. That is probably not going to go well with a lot of players if you can't even log onto it after spending $90 to $100 on one of the additions for it. Probably doesn't look that great, I would probably guess. The other side of that, though, guys, let's take another look at this. They all want to actually make money on the games and, actually get players into them and have a great time on it. The thing is, if you're going to release the game in that state or actually rush the game out, you are most likely not going to make the money you thought if you're trying to get the game out earlier and cut corners on it. And the other thing I have to admit here that I do have to say is the fact that games are not always in this said state, at least before in the time of gaming, to where they actually came out like before 2017 or after 2003 or whatever that might have been. I know that's a huge window, but we all do know back then a lot of games actually came out finished. I do think it was what, like 2010, 2011 or something like that, to where they were actually adding updates into the game at that point, so they actually could release the game broken, put updates in it. Not saying they did, but they actually can do it that way. The biggest thing that just does not make any sense to me with this thinking is down to one simple thing, though. If they were actually trying to release a game and actually get the most money out of it, wouldn't it make sense to actually have the game finished instead of releasing it a year early, or even having the game being rushed out or like, ahead of schedule? Because it just doesn't make sense if they would do it that way. And here's something I also have to clear up, though, is I'm not saying the developers are going to be fully at fault on this stuff, because I hate to admit this, but well, we can probably all agree that normally it's going to be the publishing companies pushing the game out. We can definitely see a game coming out early when you can tell it shouldn't have come out. I'm going to have to reference this game again because it's probably around a month or so old, so it's kind of hard not to reference it. That is going to be Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. We all do know for a fact right now the developers knew that game wasn't done, man. And that's the thing, though. I'm not saying just they actually knew the game wasn't done, because other games probably had the exact same issue. The thing about this, though, is they probably knew the game wasn't going to release in a great state, but they were trying to push the game out, or at least the publishers might have been. Again, I don't actually know what goes on behind the closed doors behind all that stuff, but I would probably say the game is most likely being rushed out for a few different instances in that point. And at that point, though, they're probably looking at this going, yo, the game ain't done, man. Like, the servers need more testing or something. We probably need to do some open betas, but we didn't have time to do it. This game is going to need testing because this mission doesn't work. It's glitchy or something. Players are going to get to this and their entire account's going to get deleted. Like, crazy things like that happen, but they're like, okay, we'll figure that out in some future patches. So they're actually going to release the game in a said state like that and rush it out, and then they're hopefully going to fix it with updates afterwards. I do know for a fact right now, guys, I can't be the only person looking at it going, okay, so they're going to release some updates and fix the game. Here's something, how about we actually get the game out and it's working as intended, and you don't actually have to put out 4 or 5 updates over the course of a year to actually get the game in the state it should have been released in. You can definitely tell the game was rushed out and it was not ready to be released. And I have to admit, it is kind of annoying seeing this because so many games nowadays are having this issue. Now, when you see something coming out, like a new game's coming out or something, I see a bunch of people online going, well, it's probably going to be broken on release like everything else. Don't y'all think that's a really sad way to look at it? Because I also agree with it. Every time I see a new game coming out, I'm like, oh, it's probably going to be broken when it releases. Isn't that kind of sad, bro? Like, did we really come to that point with every game coming out? You're like, oh, well, hopefully in a couple of months the game's going to be working. Like, that's terrible, bro. And you know what? Personally, right now, I feel like that's one of the saddest things right now in most of the gaming industry at the moment. Like, a lot of games coming out and a lot of players are excited, but also most of the games they look at, they're like, okay, I'm going to take that one with a grain of salt. Is it going to be broken? Is it going to be released in a good state? I actually saw a lot of people talking about this with Grand Theft Auto 6. We all do know Rockstar Games has a pretty dang good track record of releasing games that actually work. Now, we all do know the Grand Theft Auto Online, or at least you could say the GTA 5 Online, really seeing that everywhere, was at least going to be the multiplayer coming out the first initial time that it did. It was pretty dang broken for a few months, man, but that was a different issue. That was legit the servers getting completely overloaded with millions of people. And guess what? That's also probably why the Grand Theft Auto 6 online portion of it isn't going to come out for probably months and months after the main release of the single player. That's going to be because most games nowadays, guys, let's be honest here, name a game right now that can actually handle 30 or 40 million people trying to play the multiplayer. I would probably say none, because we actually had other games that were struggling to have around 5 to 6,000 people in the server. Now imagine if you had 50,000 people in those games, in those servers. It would legitimately be broken. So that's probably going to be a thing people are thinking about, like, is the game going to come out good? Can we actually play the multiplayer? Now, I do understand on the server side of it, there could be a lot of work there to actually get the infrastructure right, but are the servers actually going to be working as intended? Can I get on the game on day one and play it? These are probably going to be fairly valid questions. Now, the thing about that, though, is we all do know that new issues can show up when a ton of players are getting onto it, whether it's going to be like the servers crashing, the game crashing, finding a new bug or something, when all kinds of people are trying to get on the game. Now, we all do know if the game wasn't online only, this wouldn't actually be an issue. Single player games are not going to suffer from this, or at least offline games, which I think is a whole nother topic. But if we actually did some server testing in that side, let's just say again for Solar Crown, for example, if you actually do know the entire server side of it is going to be a tad unstable, or on the other side of that, you might not know exactly what's going to happen to the servers when everybody logs onto it, why not do a test on that to really see what the infrastructure is like? And this is easily going to be on the same point of along the lines of seeing the game being rushed out and the proper testing not being done on it. We all do know after Test Drive came out, they had that video release that was basically saying, well, we weren't expecting that many players to get on the game, and we actually had that amount getting on it. There was issues we might have not actually been aware of. That was probably one of the most shocking things I have legitimately ever heard. And you might be asking, well, why is that? The thing is, guys, if you actually know there's going to be a lot of players getting onto the game, you want to know an easy solution to it? You guys actually had a closed beta on the game, only a certain number actually getting on it. Only a certain number of players are pre-ordering it so they can log on. What is that going to be, 10 or 20,000 at the most? Might have even been less, it could have been more. An easy solution to that, though, is put a post out on X or put a post out online, even make a video about it going, okay, everybody, we want to do a server test on the game, so we're going to make the game have an open beta. It's more of the fact might actually be like, you know, a server test, you might not be able to play it, but we do want to do a test to see how the game does work. We would love everybody to come around and actually try the game out. Let us know your feedback, the issues you might face, and this can actually have a huge improvement on it. You want to know why? that is probably going to come down to the fact instead of having 10 or 20,000 people that actually pre-ordered the game, guess what? You would probably have around 100,000 players that would download it on PS5 and Xbox, and Steam would also have the open beta. You would easily hit over 100,000 people that would get on it. Then they would actually see the issues that would have played the game from day one. That way they're going to actually have an open beta a week before it. They would be like, bro, we are going to be completely doomed on day one. Like, how was that not a test? I really got insanely confused on that. Like, every game should have a big open beta for it. That way the servers can be in there and actually be tested. Players can actually jump on and find bugs and stuff. You have 150,000 people playing it and not 10,000 from the pre-order stuff. You might actually find more bugs that the 10,000 didn't find compared to 150. Doesn't that make a lot of sense? I legit cannot believe when I heard that. And I was really shocked at having an actual open beta in the game. I really do think every game should have something like that, especially due to the fact of not being sure on how your server infrastructure is. Again, this entire thing can stem back to one thing. Why is the game actually being rushed out? And if it is rushed out, they're going to be confused on why the game isn't doing great. Well, again, it's going to come down to so many factors of why that is. And I guess the biggest takeaway from this is probably going to come down to the fact of hoping the gaming industry sees the issues some of the games are having, and they're most likely going to go, well, maybe we shouldn't rush them out, maybe we should give the game more time, and then boom, it would actually be doing so much better. I do want to know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Do you also agree to a certain extent? I would probably say basically everybody does at this point, that games are being rushed out more now than they have ever been before, and it is definitely going to be an issue, especially in the last, like, I guess you could say maybe 5 to 7 years, especially maybe the last like 5 or something. But it's definitely really frustrating seeing a new game that's going to be shown, or like the trailer for it, and the first thing everybody says is, well, hopefully the game actually works day one, it's not going to be rushed out like everything else. And the saddest part about this to me, though, is probably down to the fact of all the gamers, including myself, looking at and viewing games in that manner. It's honestly just really upsetting seeing the way the industry currently is, with all the games being rushed out and most likely always being unfinished, which in return is always going to make players be on the fence whenever a new game is actually shown or even released.